الحمد لله رب العالمين له الحمد الحسن والثناء الجميل وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له يقول الحق وهو يهدي السبيل وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه والتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Inshallah ta'ala, today we're going to take Surah Nahl. We're going to be taking بإذن الله الكريم an overview of this beautiful surah, inshallah ta'ala. Surah Nahl. So inshallah ta'ala, just write the benefits bi'idhnillah al-kareem. We're not going to go through the tafsir of the surah. We're just going to go over an overview of what this surah is about, inshallah ta'ala. Today is going to be a very light day. We're not going to go into great details. Maybe another time we can go through the tafsir of the entire surah, inshallah ta'ala. This surah is called Surah Nahl. And the scholars, they mention reasons why it's called Surah Nahl. The first reason and why it's called Surah Nahl is because لأن لفظ النحل, because this term An-Nahl has not come in the Quran nowhere else except this surah. You will not find this word An-Nahl in the Quran except in Surah An-Nahl, where Allah says وَأَوْحَى رَبُّكَ إِلَى النَّحْلِ. Okay. The second reason why it's called Surah An-Nahl is because it talks about the honey and the bee and the honey that it makes. It mentions it in the ayah 68 to 69 in the same surah. It's also called, this surah, Surah Ni'am. It's called what? Surah Ni'am. That's what it's called. And the reason why it's called Surah Ni'am is because ما عدد الله تعالى فيها من النعم, the blessings which Allah counted, that Allah spoke about subhanahu wa ta'ala in this surah. The minute it starts, Allah talks about the blessings in which He bestowed upon His creation, from Tawheed and all the other things Allah has given them subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's also called Surah Ni'am. Ni'am is the plural of ni'mah. It's blessings. So, what's the name of this surah? Surah Nahl. And it's also called what? Surah Ni'am. Some of the Salaf, they gave it that name, Surah An-Ni'am. Now, is the naming of the Quran, is it tawqifiyah, meaning, is it something stated by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or is it something that the Sahabas had room to choose names for the surah? Yani the names that are in the Quran, the surahs, the names that they have, are they taken from the Prophet, or is it things that sometimes the Sahabas, they did their ijtihad and they gave a name to the surah? So what we say is both. Some places they took it from the Prophet ﷺ, and some places they took it from their own ijtihad. They gave it names. Okay? This surah, is it Makkiyah or is it Madaniyah? Yani, what does it mean? This surah is Makkiyah and this surah is Madaniyah. Put your hand up. Hiya Habibi. So Makkiyah means it was revealed in Mecca, and Madaniyah means what? Hiya, everybody agree with that? Put your hand up if you agree that Makkiyah is that which is revealed in Mecca, and Madaniyah is that which is revealed in Medina. So put your hand up if you agree. And put your hand up if you disagree. Okay. There's a bit of disagreement here now, huh? Khilaf. Hayya. You. Yeah, you. No, behind you. Your brother, your younger brother. Oh, it's you. In school, when we didn't want to answer the question, we always looked back. We didn't want the teacher to ask us. Hayy, why is it? What does it mean, Makkiyah and Madaniyah? Ah, you helped him, mashallah. So Makkiyah means what? So it's tricky. Makkiyah just means it's before the Prophet migrated to what? Medina. So it can come down in anywhere. It doesn't have to be only Mecca. It can come down in Ta'if, it can come down anywhere else. It's as long as it's before the what? Before the Prophet migrated to Medina. After the Prophet migrated to Medina now, whatever came down on him is what? It's Madaniyah, even if it was Hajjatul Wada'. The last Hajj, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورضيت لكم الإسلام دينا came down, right? Okay, but it's still considered an ayah which is Madaniyah, but it didn't come down in Medina. So it's not the place it came down, it's the time in which it came down. If it came down before the Prophet migrated to Medina, it's called what? Makkiyah. And if it came down after the Prophet migrated to Medina, it's called a what? It's an ayah which is Madani. It doesn't matter where it came down on. Just as long as it came down after the Prophet migrated. Okay? So which one is this surah? Surah Nahl. Is it Makkiyah or is it Madaniyah? Yeah? Is it Makkiyah or is it Madaniyah? So, Surah Nahl is a surah which is Makkiyah. It's a surah which is what? It's a surah which is Makkiyah. All of it. Okay? There are disputes on certain verses. The most strongest dispute is the ayah where Allah says, وَإِنْ عَاقَبْتُمْ فَعَاقِبُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا عُوقِبْتُمْ بِهِ وَلَئِنْ صَبَرْتُمْ لَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لِلصَّابِرِينَ. That verse, there's a dispute. Okay? Some scholars, they say that verse is Madaniyah. But the strongest opinion is, if there is a dispute, remember this principle, brothers. Remember this mas'ala. If a surah is agreed by all the scholars that it's a Makkiyah, but they disagree on certain verses. Some are saying it's Makki and some are saying it's Madani. Who's the burden of proof upon? So let's say Surah Nahl now is a Meccan surah, right? Then someone came from the ulama and they said, accept this ayah. وَإِنْ عَاقَبْتُمْ فَعَاقِبُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا عُوقِبْتُمْ بِهِ وَلَئِنْ صَبَرْتُمْ لَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لِلصَّابِرِينَ. This verse is Madani. Who's the burden of proof upon now? The one who claims it's what? Madani. Because the surah, the asl is, if a surah is Makkiyah, so is every ayah in it Makkiyah. And the one who tries to take a verse out from a surah and says, but this ayah is not, the burden of proof is upon him. And if he doesn't provide any proof, then it's what? It remains the whatever the surah is. And the surah here is what? Makkiyah. Idan the surah is Surah Makkiyah, inshaAllah ta'ala. So that's inshaAllah ta'ala the second point. So the first point we took is what? The first point, what was the first? The name, alhamdulillah. We also took if it's Makki or Madani. That's the second point. The third thing, inshaAllah ta'ala, I want to talk about is what objectives is this surah trying to fulfill? Maqasid of this surah. What's the objectives of this surah? Okay? Objective is what the surah is trying to achieve. Okay, it's trying to achieve certain things. The first thing is the surah is trying to achieve. The maqasid of the surah is iqamatul adillah. It is trying to establish the proof and it's trying to bring evidences ala wahdaniyatillah. It is trying to bring proof for Allah's oneness subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is also trying, the surah is It's bringing proofs forward for the Day of Judgment. This is the first point still. So it's bringing evidences for Allah's oneness. It is also providing, inshallah ta'ala, the Day of Judgment, evidences for it. Okay? And it is also providing us with what? وَإِثْبَاتُ صِدْقِ الرَّسُولِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. And that Nabiullah Muhammad is truthful and is not a liar. And that which he has come with is truth. That's the first objective it's trying to achieve. First objective is Allah is one in His rububiyyah, in His uluhiyyah, in His al-asma' wa sifat. Does that make sense? It is also, in that same first point, it's also proving and bringing evidences for what? وَعَلَى الْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, the Day of Judgment. Surah talks extensively about the Day of Judgment. وَإِثْبَاتُ صِدْقِ الرَّسُولِ وَإِثْبَاتُ صِدْقِ الرَّسُولِ. It's also bringing what? Evidence for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's prophecy. Evidences for it. And that he is a truthful man, Nabiullah Muhammad. And also what he came with is the truth. That's the first point, inshallah ta'ala. Number two, the second objective that the surah is trying to achieve is الرد على شبه المشركين. الرد على شبه المشركين. The disbelievers, they have doubts that they've brought forward. This surah tackles those doubts. It tackles those doubts. Ar-Raddu, it refutes, debunks, tackles ala shubahil mushrikina, the pagans and the polytheists of Mecca, because it's a surah Makkiyah, right? It debunks their shubah, their doubts that they brought forward. وَزَجْرُهُمْ عَمَّا هُمْ عَلَيْهِ, and it warns them out of, and it warns them away from what? That which they are upon. وَإِنذَارُهُمْ, and it warns them. It tells them to stay away from, calls them away from their way, and he warns them the evil consequences of this path that they are treading on. So that's the second objective that the surah is trying to achieve. The third and final objective that the surah is trying to achieve is bayanu ala'illahi ta'ala. It is trying, or the surah is mentioning to us, telling us the blessings Allah has bestowed upon us. Allah's blessings on us are vast and many. This surah is reminding us, it's clarifying for us the blessings of Allah. Bayanu al-ala'i, the blessings of Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, wa ni'amihi ala khalqih. The blessings He bestowed upon us subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those are the three objectives. Once you finish this surah, that's the outcome now. That is the learning outcome. This surah wants you to know these three things after you've read this surah and you've understood it. And you can repeat the first one. تفضل شيخ. صلى الله عليه وسلم وما جاء به. Correct. Jameel. So the first one was what? إقامة الأدلة على وحدانية الله تعالى وعلى اليوم الآخر وإثبات صدق الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم وما جاء به. It is to establish proof and evidences for the oneness of Nabi Muhammad and the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah's oneness is in three ways. Oneness is in Allah's rububiyyah, meaning the actions Allah does, He's alone in it. No one can do those actions. Subhanahu wa ta'ala, creating, sustaining, providing. These are actions Allah is alone in. So that's number one. Number two, you're singling Allah in the action you do, O creation. The actions that you do, praying, fasting, zakat, hajj, slaughter, all of these acts which are deeds, good deeds, you single Allah in those actions for Him. You don't do it for Him and someone else. And also you single Allah in what? In His names and attributes. Allah has asma and He has sifat. He has names and He has attributes, characteristics. Those characteristics and those names, He is alone in it. He doesn't share it with anybody. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. In there we learn about the Day of Judgment. Allah refutes those people who deny the Day of Judgment, and Nabi Muhammad is a truthful prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. Number 2. Hey, what was number 2? Hey, Fadal Ibrahim. صح. الرد على شبه المشركين. It is to refute the pagans and the polytheists. وزجرهم عما هم عليه وإنذارهم. It is to refute them, to debunk them, to call them away from their bad path that they're upon, and to tell them the evil consequences that is going to come to them if they remain on this way. And the third one was what? Bayanu al-ala'i, clarifying bayanu al-ala'i Allah ta'ala wa ni'amihi ala khalqih. Allah tabarak wa ta'ala mentions the blessings in which He has bestowed upon what? His creation. Now that's the objectives, that's the maqasid of the surah. What is the mawdu'at now? What are the topics that are spoken about in this surah extensively? What's the theme of this surah? We've learned the objectives, what we take out of the surah, but what are the themes that are present in the surah? The themes that are present in the surah. Okay, number 1. So inshallah ta'ala, we're going to mention تقريبا 14 themes that the surah tackles, inshallah ta'ala. Number 1, this is mawdu'at of the surah, and not just the aham al-mawdu'at, the most important themes that are in the what? In the surah. Number 1, that the Day of Judgment is coming. From the beginning, أتى أمر الله فلا تستعجلوه. أتى أمر الله. It is telling us straight away, the Day of Judgment is coming. التأكيد على أن يوم القيامة حق. That the Day of Judgment is truth. التأكيد على أن يوم القيامة حق وأنه آت لا ريب فيه. That the hour is coming without a shadow of a doubt. And not only is it coming, it's coming fast. Because it referred to it as what? Ata, it has already come. Allah referred to the Day of Judgment as though it's already come. And we've taken this before many times in our few lectures that we've had. That the way Allah talks about the Day of Judgment, that it's very close, it's not far. صح? إنهم يرونه بعيدا ونراه قريبا. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. اقترب للناس حسابهم وهم في غفلة معرضون. أزفت الآزفة ليس لها من دون الله كاشفة. Many ayats, right? يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد. Why لغد? It's tomorrow. Look what you prepared for tomorrow. Not next week or the day after. Fear Allah and be conscious of what you have prepared for tomorrow. And then the Day of Judgment is being referred to as what? Something that's very close. So that's the first theme of the surah. The second theme of the surah, again, is إثبات وحدانيته. The second theme of the surah, it affirms Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala's oneness again. And it talks about Allah's ability also. How Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala is able to do everything, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything in this world and everything in the universe and Allah has the ability, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that He created the humans and the ins. إثبات وحدانية الله تعالى. The second one is what? إثبات وحدانية الله وبيان قدرته في خلق السماوات والأرض. The second is what? إثبات وحدانية الله, Allah's oneness. وبيان قدرته, and it clarifies for us Allah's ability subhanahu wa ta'ala in what? في خلق السماوات, in creating the samawat and the ard. And everything that's between it subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is the one who created the ins. He is the one who created the jinn. He's the one who created the haywanat subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inzalul ma, He's the one who sends down the water from the sky. The surah talks about it. He's the one who makes the day leave and the night come in. And then the night leaves, the day comes in. He's the one that's doing all of that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the one who's controlling all of this. subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the surah emphasizes on that. The universal things that we see. All of them are done by what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third thing that the surah mentions, brothers, is it talks about Allah's blessings on us subhanahu wa ta'ala. The surah talks about what? ذكر النعم المتنوعة. It tells us the different types of blessings Allah has bestowed upon us subhanahu wa ta'ala. That He's given us subhanahu wa ta'ala from the cattle that we have, the an'am, the cattle. An'am is baqarah, the baqar, the ibil, the ghanam. He gave it to us subhanahu wa ta'ala that we benefit from. We climb them and we mount on them. He made it what? Marakib, that we climb on. We mount on these, riding the camel, we can mashallah ride. The horse, we ride on it. Allah has made it. Also it's a zina, a beauty. When you ride on the horse, look how beautiful it looks. Allah is blessed. He's mentioned it. The surah mentions all of that. He mentions it subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in there is when Allah says, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you sit down and you try to count the blessings of Allah, you will never be able to put a figure on it. Even before that, Allah says, يَعْرِفُونَ نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ يُنْكِرُونَهَا وَأَكْثَرُهُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ. They know the blessings of Allah. This is after Allah mentioned all of the blessings. This is what? After He mentioned the blessings He gave, He says they all know these are the blessings I've bestowed upon them. But then they are ungrateful towards it. Number four. التحذير مما حل بالأمم. التحذير. Allah warns from what? مما حل بالأمم. He warns of what? That which has befallen the previous nations. التي أشركت بالله وكذبت رسله. Allah warns us about the things that have happened to the previous nations who are strayed from the right path, who've associated partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They disbelieved in their messengers and their prophets. What is it that Allah is warning us of? Min adhab dunya, the adhab of this world that came to them. التحذير مما حل بالأمم التي أشركت بالله وكذبت رسله عليهم السلام. من عذاب الدنيا, the adhab that happened to them in this dunya, and how Allah dealt with them subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah dealt with them, sah? He destroyed them. The surah mentions to us. And how Allah blessed and preserved and protected the people who stuck to their religion, who were truthful about their deed, who were sincere worshippers, who were patient of the harm of the disbelievers. How Allah tabarak wa ta'ala finally gave them what? وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. The final ending is for who? The righteous people. When you read these surahs, you realize, don't worry inshallah ta'ala. What you go through, previous nations have gone through it. And Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, He what? He gave them the final ending. The fifth, the surah talks about how women were treated. ذِكْرُ عَادَةِ أَهْلِ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ. Allah tells us the evil practices. ذِكْرُ عَادَةِ أَهْلِ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ فِي كَرَاهِيَّةِ الْبَنَاتِ وَوَأْدِهِمْ أَحْيَاءً. It mentions how the pre-Islamic people, they despised, they hated girls, and how they buried them alive. وَإِذَا بُشِّرَ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْأُنْثَى ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مُسْوَدًّا وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ يَتَوَارَى مِنَ الْقَوْمِ مِنْ سُوءِ مَا بُشِّرَ بِهِ أَيُمْسِكُهُ عَلَى هُونٍ أَمْ يَدُسُّهُ فِي التُّرَابِ أَلَا سَاءَ مَا يَحْكُمُونَ. Allah tells us, if his wife comes and gives him the glad tidings that she is giving birth to a girl, he doesn't think of good. وَإِذَا بُشِّرَ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْأُنْثَى ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مُسْوَدًّا وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. He gets angry. He starts to scold. He's upset from the minute he hears that he has a daughter. And then he starts thinking of how am I going to face the community? What am I going to tell the people that my wife, those 9 months, all she was carrying was a girl. Then he thinks about, how do I bury her then? Where do I bury her? What time shall I do that? Are we all together? يتوارى من القوم من سوء ما بشر به. ما معنى يتوارى من القوم? He hides from the people, from the evil that he thinks has befallen him. Islam came, what did it do? It liberated the women from this. وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. Those girls that you buried alive and that you put in their graves, you'll be questioned and interrogated for why you buried them alive. The sixth point that the surah deals with, the Quran gives parables. It gives what? Parables. It gives amthal. ضرب الأمثال للمؤمن والكافر. It gives parables of the believer, and parables means what? The likeness of a believer. What the believer is like. This is called in Arabic amthal. Allah gives parables in the Quran for the believers. ضرب الأمثال للمؤمن والكافر والشاكر والجاحد. The one who is thankful to Allah, the one who is stubborn and hard-headed, the one who is righteous and the believer and the disbeliever. Allah gives parables subhanahu wa ta'ala. What they are like. Allah, He compares them subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this surah, it reminds us what's in Surah Al-Baqarah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَسْتَحْيِي أَن يَضْرِبَ مَثَلًا مَا بَعُوضَةً فَمَا فَوْقَهَا. Allah gives a lot of times in the Quran parables so that we understand things. With parables, things become what? And Ibn al-Qayyim has written about the parables. It is what? In his kitab I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in. The I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in, there's a chapter inside there where he talks about Amthal al-Quran. And guess what, brothers? It's been taken out and it's been made into a book from that book. And it's also translated in English. So if you want, the publishing house Darus Sunnah, they've translated it and they called it Parables of the Quran. So again, it's good to put it in the group for the people. Inshallah ta'ala, you'll find the parables that are in the Quran. Ibn al-Qayyim mentions it because parables are an argument for qiyas. Sah? Number 7, ذكر حال المشركين مع الأوثان يوم القيامة. The surah will talk about the idols that the disbelievers used to worship, that they held on to. Okay, what is it going to be the day of judgment for them then? Those things that they worshipped and they held on to, and they're like, what's going to happen? Those things, those idols that they worshipped, the day of judgment, what are they going to be? They're going to free themselves from them. They're going to be what? They're going to be separated. Isa ibn Maryam, for example, is going to free himself from them. So I have nothing to do with you guys. I didn't give you permission to worship me. As for the ones who told their people to worship them now, they're going to free themselves from their people as well. And that's what's going to happen. And they're also all going to be in the hellfire together. إِنَّكُمْ وَمَا تَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ حَصَبُ جَهَنَّمَ أَنْتُمْ لَهَا وَارِثُونَ. You and all of the things that you worship besides Allah, all of you guys are going to be in the hellfire together. The 8th thing that the surah mentions. So the 7th was what? ذِكْرُ حَالِ الْمُشْرِكِينَ مَعَ الْأَوْثَانِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. That was the 7th. 8th is what? ذِكْرُ بَعْضِ مَكَارِمِ الْأَخْلَاقِ. This surah mentions some of the good morals, some of the good etiquettes that the believers should have. ذكر بعض مكارم الأخلاق. Some of the manners that are needed by what? By us Muslims, that we should have, like fairness, al-adl, and al-ihsan, and al-badl. ما معنى al-adl? Justice. Al-ihsan, excellence. Al-badl means to give, and not to be stingy. Because that's quality of the believer to give. Okay, وَالنَّهْيَ عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ, that the believer stays away from zina, and he stays away from evil and transgressions. وَالدَّعْوَةِ إِلَى الْوَفَاءِ بِالْعَهْدِ, it also calls to be a person who fulfills the covenant that you make, and etc. Number 9. The surah, it speaks about ذِكْرُ بَعْضِ الشُّبُهَاتِ, some of the doubts التي أثارها المشركون. The disbelievers, what did they do? The disbelievers, they brought forward doubts regarding what? حول القرآن, around the Quran. They brought some doubts regarding the Quran, right? Then what happened? Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He refuted that. ذِكْرُ بَعْضِ الشُّبُهَاتِ, some of the doubts that the pagans brought, التي أثارها المشركون, التي أثارها المشركون حول القرآن, regarding the Quran. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentions it مع الرد عليها, with refuting, بما يدحضها, with what demolishes it. The doubt is mentioned and it's dealt with. Number 10. The surah mentions بيان بعض آداب المؤمن, the manners and the etiquettes that a person should come with when reciting the Quran. بيان بعض آداب المؤمن عند قراءة القرآن, when you're reading the Quran, the manners that you should come with. When you read the Quran, when you open the book of Allah, what should you do? There are certain manners and etiquettes that you need to come with. The surah mentions for you. The surah what? Mentions some of the manners and the etiquettes that you should come with. Number 11. The story of Ibrahim is mentioned. ذكر جانب من قصة إبراهيم عليه السلام. In here, we learn Ibrahim's story is very multifaceted. There's many angles we can look at it from. But it only mentions a janib, an angle of the life of Nabiullah Ibrahim alayhi salam. ذكر جانب من قصة إبراهيم عليه السلام. And this is where Allah speaks about him as a person who showed gratitude. Like it's a kamithal lishakirin. It's a mithal for those who are grateful to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Number 12. The surah mentions what? أن التحليل بيان أن التحليل والتحريم من الله وحده. Legislating, saying this is halal and this is haram, it is only for Allah. وعلى الله قصد السبيل. It is only for Allah to legislate. Saying this is halal and this is haram is for who? Allah. No one can come and say this is halal and this is haram from his own self. You have to take it from Allah and His Messenger. بيان أن التحليل والتحريم من الله وحده. Number 13. The ruling ذكر حكم من يكفر بعد إيمانه. ذكر حكم من يكفر بعد إيمانه. What's the ruling of the person who disbelieves after they took faith, after they came with Iman? What is the ruling of the person who disbelieves? Okay? ذكر حكم من يكفر بعد إيمانه. It talks about it. It also even talks about وَمَنْ يُكْرَهُ عَلَى الْكُفْرِ, the person who is burdened, who is forced to disbelieve. وَمَنْ يُكْرَهُ, the person who is forced in what? عَلَى الْكُفْرِ, disbelief. Somebody gets a gun to your head and says, disbelief. What's the ruling for that person? وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ بِالْإِيمَانِ, and his heart, on the other hand, is tranquil on Iman. And he's been forced to disbelieve, but his heart is still in love with Iman. But from the tongue, he just disbelieves. What's the ruling of that person? And he just says kufr on his tongue, okay? But his heart is set with Iman. He's happy with Iman. So this one, there's an ayah that is in there and speaks about it. Okay? And in that point, those areas, that surah, when it talks about that point, it speaks about the people who've been tested with their deed. It mentions it. وَمَنْ فُتِنُوا عَنْ دِينِهِمْ, those who were tested with their religion. And then what did they do? ثُمَّ هَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا وَصَبَرُوا, they migrated, they fought back, and they showed patience and resilience. The 14th. The what? The 14th, inshallah ta'ala, and last point that the surah, the theme of the surah is ذكر أهم الأساليب في الدعوة إلى الله تعالى. This surah teaches us the correct way, the most important steps that we should take when it comes to giving da'wah. ذكر أهم الأساليب, the most important methods في الدعوة إلى الله تعالى, when it comes to calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وفي معاملة الناس, and when it comes to dealing with the people are not all one. There are different ways of how you deal with them. And he mentions to us من الدعوة بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن. And at the ending the surah concludes and it talks about what? وفضيلة الصبر. So the 14th is what? ذكر أهم الأساليب في الدعوة إلى الله تعالى. That's what you just need to know. The most important methods in when it comes to giving da'wah. How do you give da'wah? And it breaks the people into 3 groups. There's a person you have to use hikmah. The da'wah that you give him is what? أُدْعُ إِلَى سَبِيلِ رَبِّكَ بِالْحِكْمَةِ. Say, Habibi, come on, let's go. I'll get you biryani. He goes with you, and so you take him to a restaurant and you feed him. And he gets fed and he's taken care of in terms of that. And guess what, brothers? He's happy. And then he says, you know what, you're a very nice person. You're like, my deen teaches me this. Oh, what's your religion? Allahumma barik. The door's open now. Sah? So the first one is what? Al-hikmah. The second one is al-maw'idha. Al-maw'idha is hikmah with maw'idha. Hikmah means wisdom and you're preaching a little bit. You're reminding them, one day you're going to die. One day you're going to stand in front of Allah. Do you not think about what's after this world? Do you not want to meet your Lord in the best form that you could? This is maw'idha. Al-hasana. That's the second. The third one is wajadilhum. He's a bit stubborn, he's hard-headed. He's got these preconceived notions. He feels like he knows what he's talking about, but he really doesn't. So this one is when you debate him. وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي أَحْسَنُ. You debate with him in that which is good. Don't be vulgar. And don't be rude in the way you speak. Don't say bad words. Let your speech be what? وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. If he starts to become petty, just walk away. Because it's discussion. He says this, okay, you finish your point. Okay, this is my response to what you said, and that's how it goes. But like in some discussions, it's not each person shouting and the others shouting, shouting. Nothing's getting across now. That's not وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Okay? This is the 14 points that the surah deals with. Surah deals with these 14 themes. Okay, it goes through what? Those 14 themes, inshallah ta'ala. And what is the objectives of the objective of the surah is those three things. So what we've done is four things, right? In today's session. The first thing is I spoke about the Asma as-Surah. Asma as-Surah. I spoke about the names of the surah. How many names does it have? What are they? Surah Nahl and Surah Ni'am. Okay, and I said Surah Nahl is called Surah Nahl for how many reasons? Two reasons, right? What's the first reason? It was mentioned in the surah. Okay? And the second reason why it's called Surah Nahl is because of what? The word An-Nahl has never been mentioned in the Quran in any other place except this surah. Sah? So every surah generally in the Quran, you will find the mentioning of the name of that surah in that surah. So that was the first reason. Second one is that this word An-Nahl is not mentioned in the Quran anywhere else except here. Are we all together, brothers? Good. What's the second name that it's called? Surah An-Ni'am. And the reason why it's called Surah An-Ni'am is what? It states a lot of the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's the surah, is it Makkiyah or Madaniyah? Okay, and it's what? Makkiyah in what? All of it or some of it? All of it, inshallah. That's the strongest opinion, inshallah ta'ala. Very good. What are the maqasid, the objectives of the surah? How many were they? Did we mention? The objectives of the surah, which is the third thing that we spoke about. What is it? 3, mashallah. And the theme of the surah is what? Which is the fourth we spoke about. Which is the mawdu'at as-surah is how many? 14. That's an introduction to Surah Nahl. And then you would normally take the tafsir of the surah. Knowing what this surah is about, what it deals with. And why is it very important that you have this knowledge? Because when you want to look at the tafsir of the Quran, knowing what the surah deals with, you'll know what surahs speak about what. And the surahs which are Makki surah, they generally deal with the things that Surah Nahl deals with. As you can see, Surah Nahl didn't go into details when it comes to issues of ahkam. Sah? Did it go into jurisprudent rulings? Yeah? Did we learn like ahkam of how this is done and how that is done? No. Meccan surahs don't do that because there was no ahkam, right? Was there any ahkam? Were there any jurisprudent rulings that had been sent down? No. Mecca only salah. After the shahadatain was what? As-salah and nothing else. So there isn't any ahkam to talk about. Ahkam came about when? In Medina. So you'll find that the surahs that are Madani surahs, they talk about more ahkam. Yani how to fast, how to pray, how this, marriage, divorce, business, inheritance, and etc. Does that make sense? I'll stop there inshallah ta'ala and I'll take your questions bi'idhnillahi al-kareem. So we'll open a good time for question and answer because it's going to be we're going to have to go to the tafsir of the surah. We won't go into the tafsir of the surah. So if you have any questions inshallah ta'ala bi'idhnillahi al-kareem, put your hands up inshallah ta'ala and ask your questions. Yes. Every surah that you take, you can look at the maqasid, the objectives of the surah and what it wants you to, the learning outcome and the themes of the surah. You can do that with every surah. You have to study it from the kutub of tafasir and extract from it, inshallah ta'ala. Ha. Raise your voice, I can't hear you, brother. Huh? The idols. أي نعم, yes. إنكم وما تعبدون من دون الله حصب جهنم. You're going to be the ashes. Because يا أيها الذين آمنوا, the Surah Al-Tahrim, what does Allah say? يا أيها الذين آمنوا قوا أنفسكم وأهليكم نارا وقودها الناس حجارة. So it's going to be thrown into the fire. It's going to burn. And the people who told their people, worship me. They said, worship me. And they called them to the worship, they're also going to go Jahannam with them. Because they are tawaghit, صح? الطاغوت is what? كل من عبد من دون الله وهو راضٍ. He's happy with it. He tells the people to call him. Or worship him. A question on Zoom here. What's the ruling on clapping? Clapping is for the women when they're in the salah and the imam does a mistake and no one from the men recognize that the man has done a mistake, the imam has done a mistake, and a woman is in the masjid, she claps to let the imam know that there's a mistake. Okay, but outside that, many of the scholars, they say this is the practices of women. So you find a lot of men clapping after events and lectures and things like that. You should stay away from it. Because Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala told us about the disbelievers, وَمَا كَانَ صَلَاتُهُمْ عِنْدَ الْبَيْتِ إِلَّا مُكَاءً وَتَصْدِيًا. Yani Allah, in a negative light, He said that their worships, the disbelievers, when they worship Allah in the Kaaba, was only like whistling and clapping. That's how their worship was. So we shouldn't, if we see something that we're fascinated with, what should we say? The sunnah for us is to say what? Allahu Akbar. Rather than what? Clap. Now. As you all know, the Arabic language is 12 sciences. Within Lugha al-Arabiya, there are 12 different branches inside it. Sah? So is it possible for me to tell you each and every one of those 12 how you can learn it? So the person has to be precise in what the Arabic language that they want to know. Sah? Because if you want to learn Nahu, that's one way of learning it. If you want to learn Sarf, there's another way of learning that. If you want to learn Balagha, which has three sciences within it, Ilm al-Bayan, Ilm al-Badi' and Ilm al-Ma'ani. There's 3 sciences within Balagha. And then you have Al-Urud wal-Qawafi. And then you have Ilm al-Muhadara. And then you have Ilm al-Shi'r and Al-Khitaba. All of these are what? Under the branch of the Arabic language. And even Qawa'id al-Imla, how to write properly. Some people when they send messages, they forget how to write properly. They put Hamza wherever they want. The way they write their letters is incorrect. So that you realize Qawa'id al-Imla is missing. Does that make sense? So my point is, the most important branches of the Arabic language, generally speaking, are 3. And it's what? Al-Nahu, Sarf, and Balagha. Okay? So if you want to study Nahu, you start with Ajrumiyah. By the way, before you do Nahu, you have to have studied in vocabulary. You have to have mufradat. Does that make sense? You have to have what? Mufradat. So I would encourage Al-Arabiya Bayna Yadayk is good. Medina book is also good. You do those books, you finish that. Once you finish those books, you then come to what? Now you can talk, you can understand conversations, you have vocabulary at your disposal. You just want to learn the rulings of what, when you place Dhamma, Fatha, Kasra. So I would say go for Ajrumiyah. Once you finish Ajrumiyah, you go for Mutammimatul Ajrumiyah. You finish that. Then you go for Lamiyatul Af'al, which is Sarf now. Then you go for Qatrul Nada wa Ballu Sada ibn Hisham al-Ansari. And then direct you can go for Alfiyat ibn Malik. Alfiyat ibn Malik, you do the Sharah of Ibn Aqil, and that's it. Allahumma barik. Once you learn Alfiyat ibn Malik, and it's 1,000 lines, you can memorize it in 2 months. If you do every day 16 lines. If you do 16 lines every day, it's 1,000 lines, you can finish it in 2 months without missing a day. And he starts with قال محمد هو ابن مالكي أحمد رب الله خير مالكي مصليا على النبي المصطفى وآله المستكملين الشرفا وأستعين الله في ألفية مقاصد النحو بها محوية تقرب الأقصى بلفظ موجزي وتبسط البذل بوعد منجزي وتقتضي رضا بغير سخط فائقة ألفية ابن معطي وهو بسبق حائز تفضيلا مستوجب ثنائي الجميلة والله يقضي بهبات وافرة لي وله في درجات الآخرة. And then كلامنا لفظ مفيد كاستقم واسم وفعل ثم حرف الكلام. 1,000 lines. Once you finish that, you've not only got nahu, you've now got sarf. So you learn nahu and you learn what? Sarf. Every day 16 lines, 2 months, you're finished at alfiyah. And then you go for the next alfiyah and the next alfiyah in other sciences. That is Arabic language, nahu and sarf. As for ilm al-balagha, I would say if you do al-Jawhar al-Maknoon by al-Akhdari, once you finish that, you go for al-Uqud al-Jumman by Jalaluddin al-Suyuti. It's 1,000 lines as well. And 16 lines a day, 2 months you'll finish that as well, inshaAllah ta'ala. So then now you have balagha as well. So you have nahw and sarf and balagha. I'll also encourage you to do adab, Arabic literature. Arabic what? Arabic literature. So you read the books like Banat Su'ad, which is written by Ka'b ibn Zuhair. Banat Su'adu faqalbi al-yawma matbulun mutayammun ithraha lam yufta makbulu wa ma Su'adu ghadat al-bayni idh rahalu illa aghannu ghadidhu al-tarfi makhulu هيفاء مقبلة أجزاء مدبرة لا يشتكى قصر منها ولا طول تجلو عوارض ذي ظلم إذا ابتسمت كأنه منهل بالراح معلول شجت بذي شبم من ماء محنية. It's 60 lines or 58 or 59 based on different copies, but it's 60 lines. You can do 20 and finish it in 3 days. 20, 3 days. You can also do another kitab which is Adab al-Lugha, which is the kitab لامية العرب أقيموا بني صدور مطيكم فإني إلى قوم سواكم لأميل فقد حمت الحاجات والليل مقمر. Shanfara wrote. It's in Arabic literature. These books, you memorize them. There's also the معلقات العشرة that you do. قف نبكي من ذكرى حبيب ومنزل بسقط اللوى بين الدخول. You start from امرؤ قيس. You do عنتر بن شداد عن طرفة بن العبد عمرو بن كلثوم, and all the shu'ara al-jahiliyyah, you do what they did. And then now you have poetry at your disposal, a lot of poetry, and you can learn the tafsir of the Quran. Wallahi, brothers, is very important. This is how the Quran is preserved, the meaning of the Quran. Sah? That's how you know this ayah means this, because the Arabs said this. Where did they say it? In their poetry? That's how it's preserved. And the more you sharpen your knowledge of the Arabic language, the more you understand Allah and His Messenger. Sah, brothers. And Imam al-Shafi'i, the student of Imam Malik. Shafi'i went to the people of Hudayl, Qabila Ma'rufa, and they were Afsahul Arab. They were the most purest Arabs when it came to speaking the Arabic language. And Imam al-Shafi'i spent time with them memorizing poetry from them. The tribe of the people of Hudayl. حتى عبد الملك ibn Qurayb al-Asma'i, he went to Imam al-Shafi'i and he said, Abd al-Malik ibn Qurayb al-Asma'i is an alim in the Arabic language. He said, Subhanallah, Shafi'i, أخذت عنه أشعار Hudayl. I took from him the poetries of the people of Hudayl. I took it from his mouth, Shafi'i. So Shafi'i was asked, why did you memorize all of these poetries and why did you learn it? He said, I learned it لأخدم الفقه, so I can serve fiqh. And he's the one who said, وَلَوْلَا الشِّعْرُ بِالْعُلَمَاءِ يُزْرِي لَكُنْتُ الْيَوْمَ أَشْعَرَ مِنْ لَبِيدِي وَأَشْجَعَ فِي الْوَغَى مِنْ كُلِّ لَيْثٍ وَآلِ مُهَلَّبٍ وَبَنِي يَزِيدِ. If poetry was not to put down the person, I would have been more of a poet than Labid, Shafi'i saying this. I would have memorized. So do you understand? And he's the one who said, دع الأيام تفعل ما تشاء وطب نفسا إذا حكم القضاء ولا تجزع لحادثة الليالي فما لحوادث الدنيا بقاء. يعني he's got lines of hikam Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala. So shi'r and poetry, brothers, is very important for a student of knowledge. It's what? It's very important for a student of knowledge. I encourage you guys to read a kitab written by Mahmoud Shakir, rahimahullah ta'ala. It's called رسالة في الطريق إلى ثقافتنا. He talks about, subhanallah, how what the colonizers did to the Muslims when they came to their countries, and they took the Arabic language away from them, and broke them away from the Quran, and brought them other languages. It's important that there's another kitab written by Fakhruddin Qabawa. It's called وَلَا يَزَالُونَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ. And he's talking about how they tampered with us when it comes to our Arabic language. And I always say this, brothers, the Arabic language is the language of who? Every Muslim. This is your language. If you become Muslim, this is your language straight away. The Arabic language, because it's the language in which the Quran came down in. Now. The issue of the asma of the surah, the names of the surah, is it something tawqifi or is it something which is ijtihadi? Tawqifi means it's purely taken from Allah and His Messenger, and no one's allowed to choose a name for our surah. Or is it something that's ijtihad of the Sahabas? The strongest opinion I said was that the naming of the surah is some places the Prophet named it and no one else is naming anything else, and some places the Sahabas, they gave their own knowledge of the surah and they named it. So it's both for some surahs, and some surahs it's ijtihadi. Some surahs is tawqifi and some surahs is ijtihadi. No.
Even the Mus'haf?
Even in the Mus'haf. Some of them is what the Sahabas named it. No.
Surah Nahl was named by the Prophet or Ijtihad?
Allahu A'lam. What was the first part of the question?
It's about children and planning about the tarbiyah before they are born.
Yeah, when it comes to children, the planning is from the day you want to get married. The day you plan to get married, the woman that you get married to, brothers and sisters, the brother that you get married to, this is the decision you're making for your children. You don't just marry any woman and say, oh Allah barik, she looks good. But you marry her based on, is this woman worth being the mother of my children? And the sister does the same. She says, is this man worth being the father of my children? So it's you think about it. That's why the ulama mentioned the rights that the child has on you is choosing the right spouse, the right parent for him. It's the rights of the children. Okay? Once you've now found the right person, this person is the right person, there are steps that needs to be taken before even the child comes into the picture. From them is to say Bismillah, Allahumma jannibna shaytan wa jannib shaytana mimma razaqtana, before intimacy. And if the child comes from that, then whatever comes, or the wife becomes pregnant from that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to what? Protect shaitan from that child. That's what the narration says, right? So this is before even the child comes into the picture. Now once the child comes into the picture, there is the tahniq that you do, is you buy some dates and you place it in the mouth of the child and etc. And then after that you shave the child's hair. وهكذا. This is again a sunnah that needs to be implemented. And the naming of the child is also an important factor. Ibn al-Qayyim actually mentions, he's got a book on the whole issue of children, by the way. He called it Tuhfatul Mawdud fi Ahkam al-Mawlud. It's about children, that's it. All the ahkam related to children. And he mentions, subhanallah, how the naming of the child has an effect on the character of the child. And some people don't care what they name their children. You need to tell your child, I named you after this prophet, and I named you after this sahabi, I've named you after this individual, so that the child looks up to that person that he was named after. Once then the child is given a good name, and the sunnah has been followed to that, then what's left is the actual physical tarbiyah. You're a teacher every single day for your child. You teach him how to walk, how to talk, how to carry himself, how to be in gatherings, how to respond, that's a father's responsibility. When it's a boy, it's your responsibility. You take them out, you train them, you stand up. The other day we took a few hours, I was teaching them how to shake hands. When you meet brothers, I saw them all da'if and everything, so it was a whole day we were taking a course in the house. Stand up, look at me, they were looking at me. Stick your hand out, Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum. I'm explaining to them, when you shake hands, this is how you do it. You're a teacher every day. Does that make sense? You teach them when they come into a gathering, do they just push people's necks over and then go there, or do they sit in the closest place where they can find space? All these things, it's a responsibility of the parents. Wallahi. You need to teach your children akhlaq and adab. You also have to discipline your children when it comes to their knowledge and what they learn and they acquire. Does that make sense? The tarbiyah. My children, subhanAllah, they would wake up at 4:30 in the morning, and there was 6:30 p.m. they're doing Quran only till they finish the Quran. From 4:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. It was a coordinated effort. The missus and me, we were drilling into them. So you see, we need to work together. She's doing it, I'm doing it, she does it, I do it, she does it, I do it. Does that make sense? And then I set a curriculum for them, let them memorize this book, this and that. I put competitions in there for them. If they memorize this, I will take you out when I travel next time to Kuwait. If they don't memorize, they're staying, I'm going to leave them behind. And I'm going to deliberately send them a Zoom call and show them where I am. And say, look, you're missing out. Do you understand, brothers? All of this is what? It is to, and I say, brothers and sisters, Tarbiyatul Awlad is a full-time job. It's a full-time job. When I'm studying and I'm learning and I'm in my room and I'm studying, I'm studying. When I'm at work and I'm teaching and etc., I'm out. But other than that, the third time, I'm just with them. I'm a mu'allim, I've got responsibility, I have to take care of them. So instead of socializing with people, I socialize with who? I socialize with them. So I'm spending all my time with them, teaching them how to cross their legs, how to sit down, how to do this, how to do that. They tell me stories, I tell them stories. وهكذا. I see how their brain is growing. I see what their thinking process. وهكذا. They're my friends, they're my buddies, and I'm studying, I'm teaching, and I'm with them. If you do that, inshallah ta'ala, and you make dua, Allah will protect your children for you. And Allah is with those who try their best and they exert their efforts. But to leave the children with their mothers, brothers, and to not look back, and abandon the children with their mothers, Shaykh, brothers, you know that it's a very bad thing, right? You have to be hands-on. You have to be there to talk to your children and converse with them and be with them and see how they're doing and let them be with you as well as much as you can. Because gadgets, once they get that, that's their brain. They're gonna work with that. So no, don't let them. Let them be with you. Talk to me. Be normal human beings. But a lot of people, because the parents, They don't want to spend time with their children. They give their children gadgets. They just use this and leave me alone. So the child, 10 years, he's addicted to this. You're now old. You're like, help me do this. It's too late now. You gave him a gadget. He doesn't want you anymore. He's got this. And Allah knows best, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in terms of their seeking knowledge, my children, I made them memorize the Quran first. So two of you guys finished at the age of 8, sir? Yeah. Two of them finished at the age of 8. One finished at the age of 9. And Talha is also going to finish, inshallah, at the age of 9, bi'idhnillah. So before 10, they should finish the Quran. And every 7 days, they should finish the Quran. Every 7 days. Really. And they memorize other books. Like he's finished memorization of Umdatul Ahkam, which is nearly 500 hadith and 500 hadiths on halal and haram, the do's and the don'ts. And in that time, because they finish the Quran, they do other books with it. So they memorize the poetries I'm telling that I memorize, they all memorize it with me. I give it to them. And I don't spend too much time explaining things to them. Because they're young, all they need is to memorize. They don't need understanding because they can't understand a lot of things. They keep asking you too many questions, why this, why this? So you just memorize it for now. Because memorization deteriorates as you grow older. Like in understanding, you get sharper and sharper as you grow older. So what you do is you prepare for your child for all the books to have it in his head. And then when the time comes to study, with the hifz that he's already got, and now you explaining things to him, it goes together so fast. And that's the way that the great Imams were. And Imam Shafi'i memorized the Muwatta and then he read it on Imam Malik. Okay? He'd already memorized it and then he read it on Imam Malik ibn Anas rahimahullah ta'ala. So other than my general classes, if they come to it, then they benefit from it like that. But other than that, I focus more on their hifz. Because they're not burdened aslan to do any acts of worship, sah? They're still too young. So they don't need to know these things yet. Okay? So there's no classes that I sit and I say, I'm going to explain this to you and I'm going to explain that to you. I did a few books here or there that I thought were needed, but the majority of things is I show it to them. Pray like this, good. Do your wudu like this, that's it. But I don't open a book and say, look at this book, this is what it mentions. It's all practical. It's all practical. Until they reach that age where they can go through books after books in terms of explanation. As for non-Muslims, your kids being taken to psychologists who are non-Muslims, I would not encourage that. Psychologists who are not Muslims are not what you want to take your children to, because they can't understand certain things are due to sins and disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Sins have a psychological effect on the person. We have to accept that, brothers. Sah? That's why Allah says, "Man amila salihan min dhakarin aw untha wa huwa mu'min, falanuhyiyannahu hayatan tayyibah." You'll live a good life if you hold on to Allah's deen, sah? But they won't tell you that. Psychologists will say, he's got schizophrenia, he's got bipolar, he's got this, he's got that. They'll diagnose him with way different types of illnesses, when in reality all it is connect yourself back with who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So take them definitely to who? Muslim psychologists. Okay? Definitely take them to what? Muslim psychologists. No. Why did I go through Surah Nahl? So inshallah ta'ala, next time we come, we make another surah, and we'll come 114 times. And every time we go through one surah, inshallah ta'ala. I think it's repetition. Just repeating something so many times. I genuinely believe that now. Like anything in life you want to hold onto in your brain, it's repetition, brothers. I promise you, repeat it. I already know you guys have already memorized so many things because you saw it so many times. True or false? Sah? Hatta even people who are not practicing the deen, who say, I want to memorize the Quran. A lot of them have memorized a lot of music. So I said, how did you memorize that music? They'll say, because I listened to it a lot. Sah? Because he listened to it a lot, he memorized it. Sah? One of my mashayikh, I was struggling when I was very young. I was struggling with Surah Al-Ahzab. Surah Al-Ahzab. Struggling with it. And I said, Shaykh, wallah, I don't know how you can memorize this surah. It's a big. The surahs in the Quran, you stop at them. You're like, this one is struggling. My Shaykh said something to me. He said, do you ever revise Surah Al-Fatiha? I said, no. He said, would you ever need to revise Surah Al-Fatiha? I said, no. He said, do you know it perfectly? I said, I know it perfectly, yeah. He said, is there any evidence that Surah Al-Fatiha is easy? I said, no. He said, why is it that Surah Al-Fatiha is stuck in the minds of every Muslim? I said, it's because we 17 times a day? He goes, there you go, repetition. Anything in life that you repeat, you will get to it. A poet said, اطلب ولا تضجر من مطلب فآفة الطالب أن يضجر أما ترى الماء بتكراره في الصخرة الصماء قد أثرا. If you take, I saw it myself. I saw a water pierce through a rock. Why? Because it kept going on that rock for so many years. Water, if it keeps going on one place, it will finally get through to it. True or false? Meaning, repetition in any regard, you can get somewhere with it. Does that make sense? It's just be repetitive. Like, don't give up. Why are you giving up for? Do it again. So my method of doing things is I write it a few times and I listen to it a lot. Whatever I want to memorize, I listen to it a lot. And I record it on my phone and I put it on repeat. So I listen to it, listen to it, listen to it, listen to it, listen to it. I know it's annoying. It's very annoying. Like, I can't, But finally, it will stick to your long-term memory. If you just don't stop. If you don't stop, you will get there. I know a brother, subhanAllah, whose memory of the Quran is very strong. So I asked him, what is it that you do that keep your Quran memorization? He said, an advice that you gave me many years back. I said, what was it? He said, you told me that if I read the Quran, if I finish the Quran every 3 days for 5 years, that my memory will be strong. And he said, wallahi, worked for me. What I do is, I'm not as consistent as I should be. There are times I miss, but I try my best not to. You start from Surah Al-Nas, Surah Al-Baqarah or Fatiha, and you go up to وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ. Okay? That's how many juz? تقريبا 10 juz. Or إِنَّمَا السَّبِيلُ. Depending on how you count. That's 10 juz. Then you take that from وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا غَنِمْتُم up to فَمَا كَانَ جَوَابَ قَوْمِهِ Surah Nahl. Another 10 juz. That's the second day. The third day is from فَمَا كَانَ جَوَابَ قَوْمِهِ to Surah Nas. 3, 10, 10, 10. The Quran is how many juz? 30 juz. Do you know how many hours it takes? 10 juz. 5 hours. Because let's do the calculation. Each juz takes me 22 to 23 minutes. Let's just say half an hour. 10 juz times it by half an hour. Yeah? Huh? It's that 5 hours, right? So 5 hours of relaxation. Of the times I've sip the coffee or whatever tea I'm having. So the 5 hours, does it have to be one sit? No, it doesn't have to be. You can do an hour before every salah or after every salah. And guess what? you'll finish the Quran every 3 days. If you do that for 5 years, you know the Quran like the back of your hand. It's just repetition, brothers. That's all it really is. But that is the problem. The consistency is what? تفضل. It's authentic Sahih Hadith, mashallah. Which hadith is it then? Hadith Sunnah Abi Dawood, right? Hadith Sunnah Abi Dawood. نعم صحيح. I mentioned hadith, حتى Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he authenticated this hadith in his kitab عقيدة الواسطية. إن الله لا يعجب بالشاب ليس له صبوة. That's the hadith. And Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah authenticates it in his kitab العقيدة الواسطية, when he brings it under the chaptering of صفة العجب. Repeat that one more time.
What is your advice on issuing of knowledge and then spreading the knowledge that they learn to others? Do they need permission from the teachers or certifications or like, or does it just go and propagate or spread what it shows us?
If the person knows what they are speaking about, they have ilm of it, they've studied it with the shaykh, they convey that. If you look at the jinns, when they heard the knowledge from the Prophet ﷺ, وَإِذْ صَرَفْنَا إِلَيْكَ نَفَرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقُرْآنَ فَلَمَّا حَضَرُوهُ قَالُوا أَنصِتُوا فَلَمَّا قُضِيَ وَلَّوْا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِمْ مُنذِرِينَ قَالُوا يَا قَوْمَنَا. They heard something from the Prophet and they went and they conveyed the message that they learnt. So then, when you attain knowledge, you go and you pass it on. And you teach the people what you learnt. You speak about what you know and that which you have knowledge of. You do not speak about what you don't know. If you do, you're going to be in danger. وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. Do not speak about that which you don't have knowledge of. قُلْ إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ رَبِّيَ الْفَوَاحِشَ مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَمَا بَطَنَ وَالْإِثْمَ وَالْبَغْيَ بِغَيْرِ الْحَقِّ وَأَن تُشْرِكُوا بِاللَّهِ مَا لَمْ يُنَزِّلْ بِهِ سُلْطَانًا وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. To say about Allah that which you don't have knowledge of. It's a very dangerous thing to do, sah. So do not speak about that which you don't have. And to say ولا تقولوا لما تصف ألسنتكم الكذب هذا حلال وهذا حرام لتفتروا على الله الكذب إن الذين يفترون على الله الكذب لا يفلحون. Speak of that which you have knowledge of and evidence for. He advised us what? Of the works of Ibn al-Qayyim? inshallah ta'ala, يعني ابن القيم's ورد, I mentioned it's in his kitab طريق الهجرتين, صح, وباب السعادتين. It's a daily routine. There's another kitab I've explained it as well, but it is Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen. He made a lecture that he did, and he got converted into a PDF where he speaks about the schedule of a student of knowledge. It's actually in English as well. It's actually what? It's actually in English. Sheikh Abdul Razak ibn Abdul Muhsin Abbad explained it. So I think if you just write it down, call it Daily Routine of a Student of Knowledge by Sheikh ibn Uthaymeen, it will come out for you, inshallah ta'ala. I've already done a video on that as well, the explanation of that book on the Al-Madrasatul Umariyya YouTube channel, inshallah ta'ala. The person can find it extensively there, bi'idhnillahi al-kareem. So I've never seen TikTok in my life. I don't know how it works, to be honest. I've seen Instagram, I've seen Twitter, but I've always heard about TikTok, so I don't know how it works. So my answer regarding TikTok would be incorrect if I say something about it. I don't know it. But I have heard not good things about it. I've heard bad things about it. So Allahu A'lam. You guys will know it more than I do. Like in the person who said, if I what?
If you post a reel with music on it, Instagram reel
Ah,
with music on it,
صح.
do you earn 1 cent for every person that comes across it?
Yeah, na'am, you do. If you put out a content on YouTube or Instagram or Twitter or TikTok or Facebook or whatever, and it has haram content in it, every single person who shares it, listens to it, and he uses it, you will be sinning for it. You'll be on your sin. The ayah says, يَحْمِلُونَ أَوْزَارَهُمْ كَامِلَةً يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَمِنْ أَوْزَارِ الَّذِينَ يُضِلُّونَهُم بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ أَلَا سَاءَ مَا يَزِرُونَ. You will take the sin of every single person who you've made to listen to that stuff. So if a sister comes out with no hijab, or a brother comes out with singing and haram things on a video, or a sister comes out with a haram video, that she will get the sin of every single person who watches it, and he will get the sin of every person who watches it and listens to it. So remember, and subhanallah, I've seen people whose family members cried after they lost their loved one, who Instagram or TikTok was not good. There were so many bad things on it. Music and all of that, and he passed away, and the family want to shut down the Instagram and the YouTube, the Twitter account. And they're asking how, because they don't have the password for it as well. So do you want to die and leave this world, and then there's so many people still listening to you, the bad things that you left behind, or do you want the good that you've left behind for the people to benefit from? May Allah forgive us for our mistakes and our shortcomings.
Sheikh, what's your view on nasheeds and using them in Islamic videos? You see those, continuously in Islamic videos.
It's something you should avoid and stay away from, to be honest. Stay away from it. Because a lot of people listen to it so much, they're not memorizing Quran, they're not learning ahadith. If you're going to use something, at least use the good Islamic poetries that are out there. Good, the shi'r of Abu Ishaq al-Ilbiri, تفت فؤادك الأيام فتى. The shi'r of Al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, دعي الأيام تفعل ما تشاء. عنوان الحكم by Abu al-Fath al-Busti. These books are nice poetries, beautiful to listen to. The reciter reads it nicely. So listen to those ones and use that and share that and benefit. Then using songs and things like that, which melodious and humming and all of that. Stay away from all of that.
What is the ruling
The parents are being? They're being? Are being a hurdle, okay.
Their mindset is, no one can marry my girl except my cousin, or else they won't give their blessings in nikah. They're forcing upon the girl. How can one be respectful and marry someone else?
So as a general ruling, the Prophet told us in the hadith, إِذَا جَاءَكُم مَّن تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ فَزَوِّجُوهُ فَإِن لَّمْ تَفْعَلُوهُ تَكُن فِي الْأَرْضِ فِتْنَةٌ وَفَسَادٌ عَرِيضٌ. If there comes to you a person of religion and manners, then marry them. And if you do not marry them, there's going to be a big calamity on this earth. So if a good brother comes around for your daughter, and he asks for your daughter, he's got Islam and deen, and he has also got manners, فَزَوِّجُوهُ, marry him off. Hatta, even if this person is married or not, doesn't matter. فَزَوِّجُوهُ. He's got the good qualities that you need. Sah? What is the two qualities? He's got deen and he's got khuluq. Marry. Okay, marry what? Your daughter to him. If you do not do that, the hadith says, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوهُ تَكُنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ فِتْنَةٌ وَفَسَادٌ عَرِيضٌ. If you do not do that, there's going to be a lot of calamities on this earth. If the sister has brought a brother of religion and mannerism, and the parents are saying no with no evidences, then she should take her matter to a court, and the court will take away from the father the guardianship, and the court will marry her off, even though her father is there. That's if they're going to investigate that what she's saying is true. They're going to investigate the situation. They're going to look into the issue. Once they realize that that is the case, they will marry the girl off without the father's consent. There are fathers like that. There's fathers are like that. There's fathers who have, they call it ghira, but his daughter's 40 years old and he doesn't ever want his daughter to get married. A'udhu billah. Does that make sense? But there's also another extreme that I've seen in my years, where a girl wants a brother and she's like, oh, I want to marry this brother, but my parents are not letting me. And then you tell her, okay, I'll speak to your parents and I'll speak to you all at the same time. That will never happen. She won't bring the parents. So she just wants you to just snatch the wilayah of the father and marry her off without the father's consent. And this is what fawda, it's corruption. Does that make sense? So a lot of the times the parents have a reason why they do this. A lot of the times they have what? Good, valid reason. They know this person, they know his history, they know something about him, they've mentioned their good reasons and there are some situations where they're not reasonable.